And we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek here, where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and this is Corona Geek 118. Can you believe? I mean, just the other day we had 100. Can you believe that we're already almost 20 shows in the can already?
Yeah, we're cranking along.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about shuffling Lua tables. We're going to talk about widget themes, and we're going to talk about variable function arguments. How to different ways that you can stuff data into a function. So, joining us today is somebody. Someone says somebody's echoing a little. It's probably me, Sergey. I don't know why. We got some Hangout oddities going on. Anyway, joining us today is Sergey Lur from Russia with a awesome-looking beard. Also joining us is Ed Marina from RoamingGamer.com, and he has no beard, but that's okay. He's doing no beard. No beard December, and January, and February, and March. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that are happening out in the community before we get started. I know we've got a lot going on here, and we've got a lot to talk about. Last week we talked about, on Corona Geek 117, we talked about JSON oddities. Now, if you haven't seen that show, I definitely highly recommend that you go watch it. There is a whole half of the show dedicated to just the quirks of JSON and working with it, and how to get around those things. Ed walked us through several different use cases. Ed's looking like he doesn't remember that, but it was last week. And he gave use cases, and he also gave solutions for those. And so go check that out. There links to everything are in the show notes, as always. Also, if you haven't been to Corona University in a while, now is the time to go. And if you haven't actually been to coronalabs.com in a while, now is the time to go. The whole theme has been updated. The documentation look and feel has been updated. It's all flat design now. So things are kind of, have been moved around a little bit and are different. It's kind of like when you call a business and they say, please listen closely because our menus have changed. They all say that. And they're all lying. But I'm not, because the design has actually been updated and things are different, and you need to go check it out. And while you're over there, go to Corona University and look at the videos that are there. We have over 100 videos on how to use everything from widgets to the physics API. There are sample apps that are built that you can look at, so that you don't have to necessarily build the code yourself and look at it. You can just watch a video if you are so inclined. So go check that out. Also, if you are looking for learning resources, if you are the type of person who likes to curl up with a good technical book on a nice cold wintry evening with a cup of tea and maybe a dog and a unicorn and some ponies, then you need to go over to burtonsmediagroup.com and use the coupon code Corona Geek and save 20% off of your purchase. You can buy your next Corona book over there. Dr. Burton's got a lot of books on his website, and he's got several on Corona. And like we talked about last week, if you buy a technical book, you can search it, whereas for a book that's a paper book, you can't do that as easily. I went this weekend to a Barnes & Noble and was flipping through books looking for some technical books on JavaScript, and some of the more of the insight type books, not just straight up how to. But one of the things that I kept running into is I wanted so much to buy that book and put it on my shelf, but I knew it was already outdated. I knew that I wouldn't get any more updates, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to search it. I wouldn't be able to just hit and then copy paste my code. And so I enjoyed my cup of coffee while I was there, but I did not leave with any books. So if you're the type of person who wants to get your answers quick and you like to be portable, then go over to burtonsmediagroup.com and use Corona Geek to save 20% and buy a book for somebody else. Buy a book for a friend. I'm sure you have a geek friend that you can buy a book for. I mean, seriously, buy a book for Ed or Sergey. Come on. Also, if you are a Clash of Clans fan, then you can join the Corona Geek Clash of Clans group. Just go on there. It's an open to anyone kind of thing. Dr. Burton's on there. Chris Byerly's on there. I'm contemplating playing under that group. And it's basically just a learning place where everybody can kind of get a feel for Clash of Clans and some of the things that it's doing. If you haven't watched, I think it was Corona Geek 116, I think it was, that we had a whole section devoted to the psychology and game mechanics of Clash of Clans. So go over there and check it out. It's just a great little space to kind of get a feel for the game and figure out what they're doing right and how you can implement those things into your own games. We're gonna announce the Dr. Spin. Was it the November Dr. Spin Geek Facebook gameplay thing? But we're gonna do that at the end of the show. Mainly because I forgot to choose a winner. But we'll have that. I know Ed's face is like, what? I forgot to go look. We had submissions, and I think I know who won. But I want to make certain because I don't want to announce somebody who didn't win. But anyway, if you haven't played that yet, go over to drspingame.com and check it out. It's an excellent game. You collect Zetas. There's you unlock monsters. It's a fun game. You can check it out at drspingame.com. And we've been posting promo codes all week long. Scott Shapiro has been gracious enough. He and his partner in crime there have been gracious enough to supply us with promo codes. We've been sharing those out all week, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And our next game, which I'll talk about again at the end of the show, is going to be City Birds. I don't remember. Do you guys remember those City Birds? We had the developer on. It's a great app. He's updated it, added some additional gameplay mechanics, and anyway, we're going to use that for December's challenge. So there will be a link in the show notes to that as well. So go check that out. All right, random bits. Let's do some random bits before we get into our technical stuff for today. Did you guys do any shopping over the weekend?
I have updated my game, 2048 Hex, on Google Play.
Yeah?
And it's gonna be, I suppose, this week out on iOS because it's been already like 8 days in review. So hopefully it will be out soon. And the update includes a new board. It's shaped in hourglass, so it's a new mechanic.
Oh, nice, nice. That's awesome. What inspired you to do it that way?
I had it in my idea, and also some of my players emailed me and said it would be cool to make such a board. So we were actually thinking about the same thing. It was cool.
Is it harder or easier?
Somewhat easier.
I guess challenging is the word we should use, not harder. Harder sounds like work. Yeah. Challenging sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's more fun to play.
It's more fun to play. I will have to check that out. That's definitely one of my favorite games to play. Just because the mechanics, the concept is simple, to grasp, but you can play it for hours. I mean, I've spent way too much time playing that game. All right. Well, when will it be ready? It's already ready, or it will be ready?
On Google Play, it's ready. On iOS, it's gonna be ready. I hope this week.
Okay. So you'll have the links on spiralcodestudio.com.
For sure.
Okay. So go check that out, spiralcodestudio.com, if you're interested in the 2048 Hex sort of gameplay. Here's a different spin on it. Go check that out. Hey, did you guys do any holiday shopping over the weekend? Did you do any kind of? Did you visit Amazon to see what they were doing, or anything? Did you bring up any sort of online retailer?
I visited eBay. I visited Amazon, but I couldn't find anything interesting for me. There were a lot of smartphones and tablets on sale, but I don't need any. So, and besides that, there are not that many interesting deals for me. And I bought a bunch of games on Steam.
Okay, so you cashed in on, were they sales that attracted you, or what was the?
Yeah, the discounts were really great, like 75% off, 50% off. So I bought a bunch of games that I wanted to play but never had time. So, and now next year, until next Black Friday, I will have something to entertain myself.
Well, here's the thing that I think is interesting. One is that Black Friday has become sort of this international, universally understood thing, right? I mean, from a retailer standpoint, it's obvious, obviously a good thing to try to get everybody on the same page, excited at the same time. But I was surprised to learn that in the UK they don't do Thanksgiving, but they do they do Black Friday, which
we don't do Black Friday in Russia, or Thanksgiving, but Black Friday is becoming somewhat popular. So every year, more and more shops are participating in this activity. However, it's something funny and strange and disturbing that 1 or 2 weeks before Black Friday, retailers increasing the prices on products slowly, and on Black Friday they drop it to the way it was before, and the discounts is like 30% off, 50% off, but actually it's the same. Do you have this?
I'm sure we do have that a little bit.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure we do. I don't monitor the pricing enough to know whether or not I'm saving anything anyway, right? I mean, I think that's most people. They just walk in and they see a sale sign and they're like, oh, good, it's on sale.
Right.
I'm a bit of a skeptic with regards to the whole word sale. People get excited to say, oh, I'm saving 50%. I'm like, okay, well, what's it really worth, though? I don't care what the price is. I don't care what the manufacturer's suggested retail rip-off price is. I want to know what it's really worth.
You know what's funny is when I visit some mall, there's like boutiques with clothing, and they have sale printed on glass forever. So they're saying we're on sale forever. Just who cares?
Yeah.
Which makes no sense. There's no such thing as a on sale forever. That's just the regular price then.
Right. Well, people do respond to that though, right? I mean, because there's some psychological thing of saving, or getting something for a different price.
Hacking our brains.
Do math is what the problem is.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked is that IBM put out these their stats. Their research arm put out this stat that said that this year marked the first weekend after Thanksgiving where mobile traffic accounted for more than half of all online traffic. And that was they were saying on Saturday and Sunday specifically. So I thought that was interesting. Mobile traffic, we see stats that says mobile traffic is on the rise and all that kind of stuff like that, but what does that really mean in terms of sales? What does that mean? I mean, are people just surfing sites, or are they actually doing things? And as smartphones become, and I would say phablet-sized smartphones, I don't know if I ever considered really purchasing too much on my iPhone 5, but on my iPhone 6, there's plenty of real estate to get around. It just seems like there's more opportunity now to purchase things. And what do you guys think? Do you spend a lot of time buying things through your mobile device besides apps?
Not really.
Never even occurred to me.
Never even occurred to you. So like you don't comparison shop when you go to, like, if you go to let's say you did go to a bookstore, would you check the prices on Amazon? Would you?
Sometimes I do that, but most oftenly I do check prices before I leave my home, so on my PC, on my computer.
Yeah, I do all my research in advance.
Yeah.
I generally go knowing what I'm going to get, and then if I see something at a store that I consider buying, I won't buy it then. I'll just write it on my list and come back and check it later. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think stores have become a place where you try on something that you're not sure about. Like going and flipping through a book. You go flip through the book and you're like, oh, okay, but I'll go order it on Amazon. Test driving things. They also said the IBM report said that mobile traffic accounted for 51% of all online traffic the past weekend. It was an increase of 25% year over year. And also that mobile sales actually accounted for 28% of all online sales, and that was an increase of 24.9% year over year. So people aren't just comparison shopping; they're actually making purchases. So I thought that was interesting. The other
interesting news: Sony have made new smartwatch that's made entirely of electronic ink display. So the display and the band is all the surface is display.
Is it how big is it? Is it thin? Is it?
I'm not sure. It's how to call it, fast watch. Interesting.
Is it like a low energy kind of thing, or?
Yeah, it runs. It says it runs 90 days without charge.
Well, that would be great. I mean, I don't know what you can. I mean, I don't know if you can do all the 3D animations and stuff or whatever that you might be able to do with.
Well, it's electronic ink, so there's not so many graphics options, but it's a watch. It's a smartwatch.
So if you're wanting to do weather and stocks and heartbeat and all those types of numbers and stuff, then you're good, right? So data,
Right.
if you're pushing data, then you're good. That's actually an interesting form factor because I have unlimited. Well, I have lots of optimism. I don't want to say unlimited. I have lots of optimism for Apple Watch, and also for all the Android smartwatches that are out there.
Did you practice that so you can get it right and say Apple Watch this time?
I know, but I just really, my brain just did a flip. I mean, I was trying real hard not to say iWatch. But at this point, it's just still kind of a fad. You know, the geeks want it, and I'm not. I have yet to see. I've yet to see it in the wild. I've seen it on, Tech TV, and I've seen it not Tech TV, Twit, and I've seen it on a bunch of other sources and stuff. But I have yet to see one of these things in the wild. So I just wonder if something like that, where it only needs to be charged every 90 days, and it's really just a data push, and it's very practical. I mean, would that be more interesting to people, especially your athletic types?
What I worry about with a watch like that is the durability of the display, the how waterproof is it, sweatproof is it. If I'm going to use it for athletic purposes, then, for example, I wear my watch. I don't have a watch on, but I wear my watch face on the inside of my wrist, not the outside.
Well, they have to save up some stylish and polishness for the next version of Apple Watch.
Yeah. I mean, I can see a big industry around this when it gets released is watch covers to protect the face. Because that's going to be a #1 damage on these watches is people like me, especially, who wear them on the inside and are whacking their wrist on stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Wrist down. I can see that. So.
Yeah, I have. I had one of the.
Okay, go
ahead. I was going to say I had one of the armbands that tracks your movement and all that kind of stuff like that, and I always wore it upside down as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just imagined a glove, and it goes all the way to here of the watch, and you can fold and some kind of a window to see the watch.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's going to open up a whole new category of accessories, as long as people actually buy them.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're buying, and I know you're a guy who does this, Charles. Do you have a Fitbit?
I don't have a Fitbit. I had the other one, which it's over there.
I'm thinking about getting the Fitbit Surge later this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the what do you call it? The Jawbone, which is a nice device. I don't think it does pulse. It just does steps and.
No, it doesn't do pulse.
Yeah, I want one with pulse.
But I like the form factor. I like that it's got this springy sort of element to it, and you just slip it on and off your wrist. And I always wore it kind of like this, so that the silvery side was upside down, and the battery side was always down here. Which this is my third one. I've had to replace it 3 times, and I think it could be because I'm wearing it incorrectly. I mean, when they show it. I agree, but when they show it,
people wear their watches up on the top. I don't know what they're thinking there.
Well, when they show it, they always show it with this little silver thing down, which to me is it's going to scratch something or clank against something or whatever. And this other side is it's just a rubber side that. Anyway, I like this device. The one thing I actually gave up on step counting and all that kind of stuff like that. I even liked at one point I liked the tracking my sleep patterns and how well I rested and stuff like that. I gave up on all of that. And the one thing that remained was that it would silently wake you up in the morning. It just buzzes and it just wakes you up. And that to me is like that's the one major function of the device that I that I
You
like.
got an invention for that already. It's called the alarm clock.
No. See, once you've been woken up with a zzz, with a little buzz, a little gentle sort of nudging, not nutting, nudging. What do you call that? Nudging.
Electroshock?
Yeah, a little electroshock. Then the alarm clock is like this. It's just so intrusive. It's a horrible way to start your day. But if you just get somebody to maybe just say, hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. You know.
It tracks your sleep and wakes you up when you are most awake.
It's supposed to. It's supposed to figure out. You give it a window. You can say, "Hey, I want you to wake me up at this time," but you can wake me up within a 30-minute window, right? So they can wake you up 30 minutes earlier than that, and then it's supposed to figure out, based on your sleep cycle or whatever, whether or not when to wake you up. And I always noticed that it did a pretty good job, but it wasn't perfect. I mean, there were times when it woke me up and I was right in the middle of a dream, and I'm like, hey, what? So. It was pretty good, though.
I want such alarm.
Before we start the new technical content, I did want to make a correction from last week.
Yes.
So last week, I gave the first example where I said, well, I thought this used to be a problem. It's not a problem anymore. It's the sparse numerically indexed table saved via JSON and then restored. And just that whole part there, somebody wrote me later and they said, yes, this can still be a problem. You are probably just getting lucky on the timing. And I think if I remember the email correctly, and they'll probably write me back and say, Ed, you got it all wrong. But I think that the situation is on a larger table, if you create holes or you create it with holes, eventually you're going to get whacked with by garbage collection. And then when you try to iterate over the table, it will only be up to the first index that is preceding a gap. So you won't get the actual full length of the table. Whatever the case may be, it sounds like uh-oh, did we lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like the detail where I said it wasn't a problem is still a problem. So just beware. Saving and restoring tables, numerically indexed tables via JSON.
Well, I'm not sure about it. If you create a gap in a table, you won't be able to get properly the length of the table, but you're pretty fine iterating over it. All the elements after the gap will be there.
No, you'll be there. It depends on how you try to iterate over it, though.
Well, you save up somewhere the correct index, the last index, and you can use it to iterate it.
What I'm saying, though, is people use their traditional iterators, like the pound or the...
Oh, yeah, pound doesn't work with gaps.
Yeah, so you'll be messed up. But I was getting lucky last week when I tried it, and it still worked. And the reason somebody wrote to me later, they said, is because you hadn't gotten garbage collected yet, and so the gap was, I don't know. Anyways, the point is it still exists, or it could exist, and so just be cautious.
Okay. Excellent. Let's talk about, looking at our thing here, let's talk about themes, widget themes. You guys want to do that real quick? Don't have much to say there, but other than just to highlight these themes that are available and kind of point people to resources if they're interested in working with themes. But we can go over that real quick, and then we'll get into passing in variables and shuffling table items and stuff like that. So if you haven't been out to cravecreative.com, you should definitely check that out. The developer there has created several different widget themes that you can purchase, I think for a reasonable price, and get yourself up and running on a variety of different looks and feels for themes. So if you're kind of in that space, you want to do that thing and you don't really know, you don't want to spend the time to do it, or you just need something, to get you up and running, then here's some great options. So if you go over to their website, cravecreative.com, then on the menu, click on Developer Resources. Then there's 3 different widget themes there. So and they're all in different colors. So this one in particular is it says it's bold and dimensional. So it kind of looks like rounded corners and things like that. So you have your traditional button type deals. And I like the way I'm mousing over here that he's giving me the magnification of the theme. It's a pretty kind of a cool little effect he's got going on there, just to give you a good look at what the widget items look like. So, but if you want to, you can pull those up in different colors. So they've got gray and light blue and pink, and it's all kind of the same style of buttons, but they're just colored, differently. So if you go to let's see, widget theme 2, then you wind up with what they call bright and elegant, which is a little more, not as brash, just sort of more muted colors. That sort of thing. And again, all the colors are in different, you have different colors to choose from, which is kind of cool. I mean, all this, we'll look at the project in just a moment, but all these images, you have to create all the different variations yourself and slice everything up and put it into sprite sheets and what have you, and he's already done all the work for you. So here's one, light and dimensional, which again is sort of a lighter color, but still sort of a boxy or rounded buttons. Which is this actually makes me think of the old school type buttons and stuff. But if you're going for that, then that's cool. And then of course they all come in different colors, right? So that's pretty cool. So let's look at real quick here. Let's look at the project for that. So I've got one here, one of the widget themes. This is the blue demo, and if you look at the project, you've got all the you've got button images, which are in sprite sheets. Then you've got some sample tabs, and then like here's pull this up here. Here's the images with all the buttons and stuff on it, in the sprite sheet. So here we've got all the different sizes. So everything is kind of done for you already. Which again, like I said, if you can do all this yourself, and I'll show you the resources for that, but it's already done, which is a lot of value there. So let's just bring one of these up. Let's start one of these. Oh, I already had it open. And so it shows it's kind of like the standard widget demo. Shows you all the different pieces in action, which basically means if you're not familiar with working with widgets, or you want to have an example of a widget, there we go. I was looking at the wrong screen. Then basically you've got some sample code to work from. And like I said, there's all these different tabs, shows you all the different things. So if you're looking for something like that, go over to cravecreative.com and check it out. It's I think like I said, a good value. And if you actually want anything custom created, the developer over there, Mike, he will create custom widget themes as well. So hit him up for that if you're into something in particular that you don't see here represented in all these different options. All right. Let's move on to passing variables into functions. Sergey, I think I've got some notes here that you shared on one of these. Let's see here. So I know you're definitely up on this conversation. Let me move my notes around here. So the original tutorial, the one that we're going to talk about first, or mainly, is this tutorial about pushing variable arguments to functions. So basically a variable number of parameters going into a function. But this tutorial actually references a previous tutorial, which is passing data to and from functions, which I brought up here. So let's talk about that first, and then we'll talk about the other one that we're really after. Basically, what it comes down to is that functions are reusable chunks of code. And I'm basically going to just go over this for anyone who is kind of new to Corona, new to programming. So if you already know what a function is, just bear with me for a moment. So functions are these reusable pieces of code. You can typically pass in data into the function. So if you need to make the function aware of pieces of information or functions or whatever, you can do that, and you can oftentimes get data back from the function. this is pretty standard in all programming languages, but Lua has some ways that it treats things that are sort of different, and those are some of the things that we want to highlight today. So anytime that you're passing in parameters or arguments into the function, the idea of it being a parameter or being an argument, you might see that being used interchangeably in documentation, but pretty much means the same thing. Do you guys know if there's a technical difference between a parameter and an argument? I figured say
parameter like in a table?
No, just I mean, it's conceptually parameters and arguments mean the same thing.
Well, I'd say parameters are named and arguments are not named in Lua.
Okay, so it's more general. An argument is more of a generalized placeholder, whereas a parameter is actually you're naming it and you expect to identify it in some way.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was digging through looking for those types of snippets. I couldn't find one, but that's a good. That breaks it down well. Parameters are not required, so you don't have to pass a parameter into a function, but oftentimes you do because you want to make it a reusable piece of code, and you want the values that you're working on to change in some way. So at that point, that's when you're going to want to pass in parameters. And then one of the things I think is interesting, of course, is with Lua. Parameters. Their data type can be any valid Lua data type, so strings, tables, other functions. Makes it really flexible, I think, just to be able to pass in just whatever you want. And one of the other things that I like that is mentioned in this article is that you can have optional parameters. So you wind up with basically, we've seen this before in the past where you do like an OR, where let's see here if I can scroll down and find it. Basically, you're saying you're defining your arguments or your parameters on the function declaration, but then you're saying, well, some of these I may not necessarily want to pass in a value for, depending on my situation, and so therefore I'm going to use this OR operator to say, okay, I'm either going to grab a value or I'm going to use some sort of default value. So you can, in this instance here, they're actually setting the OR multiple times, trying to figure out, well, if it's this or that or this other thing, then use this. And then the other thing that I thought was that's I don't know. I think I don't think it's specific to Lua. Other languages do it as well. Is that you can return multiple values from a function.
Yeah, you can.
I think that's really helpful. That was one of the things I didn't like about working with like C or C++. I think you had to do like pointers and stuff, right? You had to do all these crazy things if you wanted to return multiple values. But Lua natively supports it, and if you return more than one value, then you don't have to use all the values. You can just use one value in particular, but you can return multiple values from a function. Okay, so that's all there. That's a tutorial on passing data to and from functions. Those are kind of the highlights of it. And then when we get into passing a variable amount of arguments into a function, that's when it kind of gets a little more interesting. Namely because by using the 3 consecutive periods in the function declaration, then you can pass in basically multiple parameters, and not even have to define them. You don't have to say, like it's the number of points or the first name or whatever it is you're trying to pass in. You just put those 3 dots, and you can pass in as many parameters as you want. Do you guys use this often?
Not often. Sometimes.
I use it in my SSK libraries.
Yeah, it seems like it would be geared towards more of if you're building, like you say, libraries, reusable pieces of code where you want to, you don't know exactly what's going to be passed in, and you just want to do a sort of a factory manipulation of things, where you want to be able to take in something, process it, and then spit something out, but you just don't know what that's going to be.
I use it in cases where I want to give the user freedom with regards to the kinds of content they're passing. For example, I have a 2D math library, and the arguments that you're allowed to pass in are 2 display objects. Let's say you want to do a vector subtraction. You can pass in 2 display objects, or you can pass in 4 values x, y, x, y. So in different scenarios, users may have 2 objects they want to just quickly subtract and get a vector from, or they may have the x, y values specifically that they've created somewhere else in their code, and they want to get a vector value from that. So with the ellipses, I can discover the type of the argument that was passed in, and you'll go into this, but it just gives me the freedom to give them one signature, which is one spelling of the function name, that behaves differently in the sense that it takes a different set of arguments and still responds with a meaningful return value.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Most often I use ellipses when I want to wrap some function within another function. So if say I want to wrap display new text function, I could say function my new text and with ellipses, and I can add all other arguments to the first function or perform some login, and then I would just pass all the arguments to the next function, display new text, the original one. And whatever user passes to my wrapper, all that stuff goes to new text without me worrying about it.
And this is typically code that you're trying to write with the intention of sharing with other people, or is it code that you write for yourself?
Mostly for myself.
Okay. Do you guys both try to write reusable chunks of code like that? I mean, hey, I'm going to be using this at some point in the future, or I could potentially be using this at some point in the future. So you always try to write that way, or is it just? I mean, how do you figure out when to do it?
I write code first without intention to make it as versatile as possible, but when I actually need it to be versatile, I don't get lazy and I refactor all my code when I need it.
Okay, so you start out creating something with a specific purpose in mind, and then you go back later and make it more multi-purpose.
That's right, because from the first time you really can't understood what exactly you're gonna need afterwards.
Okay, so I got you. So it's kind of hard to figure out. Okay, well, I'm just going to sit down and write this function and that does all these amazing things without even knowing what those amazing things should be yet.
Right. Basically, I have my functions, which is app.newImage, and I have like 4 variants of this function, and my most advanced variant can use images from sprite sheets. It can load image dimensions from files itself, so you don't have to pass your dimensions in code.
You've got a way of extracting image dimensions from a file?
Well, I read it from file in binary, from PNG and GPG.
I want that code.
I will share it. You can go to my website, spiralcodestudio.com, or this big yellow button which says donate, and the more people click this button, the faster I write code tips.
There you go. I love it.
And I want to thank the first donator, which was the creator of Zero Brain Studio IDE. Thank you, Paul.
Awesome. What, Ed, did you have any other thoughts there?
I do, actually. I wanted to point out the variable arguments are wonderful. First of all, I didn't answer your question. You asked how do we design our code. Pretty much the same way for me. I write code based on need, and then if I find myself solving the same problem multiple times, then I will take that solution, whichever one I've most recently created, because I find myself solving problems for different scenarios, and then I will consider putting it into a library and making it more robust. But generally, I write code for speed the first time around. And then I wanted to say that leads to the second thing, and we haven't even gotten into this yet, but I think Sergey will agree with me that in general, when you try to create a function with or without ellipses and make it more flexible or have more features, it suffers from slowdown generally. Usually, if you're trying to solve one specific problem, for example, trying to do vector math and you're passing in just xy, x1, y1, x2, y2, and you're going to operate on those exact known values, then the next steps in your code are going to be quick and as far as they're going to be fast. But then if you try to be more flexible and say, well, I'm going to accept objects or I'm going to accept actual values, everything gets slower because then you have to detect what was passed in, you have to convert some details, you have to take a different path in your code so that the function is going to be longer and it's going to have more steps and in general be slower. So
that makes sense. I mean, it's like going to buy something at the store. Here's $1. Okay, transaction's done. Okay, step up the counter, hand over a bag of nickels. It's the same thing.
What I don't like about ellipses is that it hides names of arguments. So if you have a variable number of arguments, but it's up to some point, like you have different syntax for the same thing, it's really better to use table as an argument.
I agree. I prefer parameterized inputs in a table. Is that what you're saying, Sergey?
Yes. Because with ellipses, it's not clean. It's not readable well enough. So basically, really, ellipses are useful when you need, I don't know, pass in elements of the same type, I'd say, so homogeneous arguments. But then again, you can pass single table holding all of them. So it's just a matter of taste, I suppose.
So now, are we talking about, you're saying go ahead and define your parameters in the function declaration, but are we saying, Ed, you're shaking your head, am I saying it wrong? Are we talking about doing that, or are we talking about using that in predefined parameters in combination with ellipses, or are we saying not to use ellipses at all? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
My thought is that your code should be clean and readable.
Yeah. And
when ellipses don't make it clean and readable, don't use them.
Okay, gotcha. So it's a little too cryptic then sometimes to use the ellipses because you're not sure exactly why.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. I agree with that. I mean, typically I like, and there was one thing in the tutorial here that said, where was it? I think it was the bottom. It was talking about adding on a JSON function, I think, or a join function or something to the string object, and then it was talking about because we're doing this sort of an object-oriented fashion. Then you could either say cookie ingredients equals string.join and then have your list of parameters, or you could say cookie ingredients : join and then join the cookie ingredient object would be inserted as a parameter of the function automatically. I was like, what? I mean, to me that just didn't make it. It wasn't as intuitive as spelling it out the long way, so to speak. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
this is an example of two sugar scripting cases in one. First one is the colon syntax, and the second one is a string library trick.
Right. Yeah. But I think it was saying that you could do, because you were doing it as a object-oriented type notation, then you could do it either way. And then the second one with the colon would make the code more compact, But at the same time, I was like, well, there was nuances that you would have to be aware of how it works in order for you to understand, what's going on. And I tend to like to spell it out, so that, I mean, even things like, what was one of the other things that it said you could do, like, oh, I know what you had said, and I think this is an excellent example here at the bottom. You had said that with the ellipsis, you could actually do your put all your variable declarations on one line, so you could have like that. So that was a great tip. If you guys haven't checked that out, check out Sergey's comments at the bottom of the blog post. But I almost, I don't know. In these situations where you can kind of put them all together, all the variables together, that's okay. I tend to like to split my variable declarations out into a separate line, each one out into a separate line, and that drives some people nuts because it expands the footprint of the code. But to me, it's like, well, now now my variables aren't lost in some declaration on it's all strung out on one line. What do you feel about that?
I'm sorry, say that again?
It doesn't understand the question. Maybe I didn't say it right. You know how when you do your variable declaration and then you've got them all separated by commas and they're all on one line?
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel like that makes it more or less understandable? Or?
It's not about understandable for me. I forward declare my variables so that I can use them later and have them visible. All the reasons you normally forward declare. I like this trick that Sergey has pointed out because I like compact in terms of vertical spacing, because a typical editor only has 60 lines that you can see at any one time.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to look at code, the more vertically compact you can make it, the better. Right. However, as soon as I start initializing the individual values, which we're not doing here, then I put them line by line because I like to align vertically and horizontally just to make editing later easy and make it more legible. So both situations apply. Line by line, or in this case, I very much like this solution that Sergey has, especially because he's giving this example, which to me looks like sort of like throwaway variables, just temporary variables that he's using to do some calculations or something. They don't really have any, their names are just A, B, C, D. Mm-hmm. And maybe you did that, Sergey, just because it was quick to type it for this. But in some cases, when you're writing code, you put speed, velocity multiplier. You give them kind of verbose names. Or your other approach is, I know exactly what I'm doing. I just need to get this done. A, B, C, D. I use them in the order. Nobody has to understand what those values are because nobody's going to maintain this code later except for me.
Never use ABCD in your code.
Okay. What about IJ, L, and M?
Well, IJ, I
How about K and V? That little joke.
I've seen code, even on the site here. I think even in some of these examples, I've seen T is used for table and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't tend to like those types of variable names anyway.
Yeah, I generally prefer variables spelled out so I know what they're doing.
So right. StarCrunch had pointed out a couple of things along with Sergey. StarCrunch had said that the 3 dots doesn't need to be the only parameter, no. But it does need to be the last.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So he says alternatively the function could be written as, and let's see what his functions are down here. He's saying that it could be written as this, where you've got basically you've got your whatever your named parameters are, and then you put the ellipsis at the end, or the three dots at the end, and then that way you still have flexibility, but you're using named parameters as well. So that was interesting. And he also said this produces a table called arg, which is numerically indexed table or an array that can be iterated over to access each of the arguments. So again,
when I talked to Roberto, creator of Lua, he said that he doesn't like the arg table, how it got implemented, and it was kind of a bad design. ellipses do work better, but then again, ellipses are a unique element of the language, and they are not tables, they are not just some variable, they're just these special things that get special treatment. So it's kind of weird.
It seems fairly intuitive. I mean, when you're looking at the code, you're kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, once it may prompt you to go look it up and try to figure out what exactly it is, but once you understand what they're doing, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense, I guess. So
for me, ellipses look like syntax sugar for like whatever you enter as arguments for a function, it gets expanded and copied in every place where you use ellipses later in the function. So if you have add numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, local arguments equals curly braces, it's going to be not ellipses, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I understand it this way.
Interesting. I'll tell you one of the things that I liked, let me bring up some code here, is this being able to figure out what you're looking at by type. So you pass in your parameters, your arguments, using the syntactic sugar that you're talking about, and then you're able to go in and figure out what type something is. So you can evaluate those arguments, those parameters, and say, oh, it's a string. If it's a string, then I want to do this. But if it's a table, then I want to treat it differently. I want to do this. So I thought that was interesting, just using the simple type function. So that was another piece of the tutorial that I thought was worth highlighting. So if you haven't had a chance to check those out, definitely go to give it a look. Let's see here. Let me see what I keep. I apologize to anybody who's watching the video. I keep flipping back and forth between Sergey and Ed and not highlighting the code on the screen. If you haven't had a chance to see this tutorial yet, go over to coronalabs.com and check it out. We'll put a link in the show notes. But it's an excellent tutorial. There's lots of little snippets that are worth extracting from it, little nuggets of information that are worth extracting from it, and it only takes a few minutes to kind of walk through it. So go check it out. And let's talk about shuffling Lua table items. I think this is another interesting tutorial that was on the blog. Let's see here. We bring the code up for it. The tutorial is pretty straightforward. Again, let me try to find my notes here. Basically, what you're doing is you are creating a table of items, if you were doing like a deck of cards or something like that. And then what you want to do is you want to extract those items from, first of all, you want to randomize the items, and then you want to extract each one of them from the table or use them in some way, but not have them repeat. So the example that the tutorial gave was, like, let's say that you're doing a dice. You might have a set of numbers for a dice game, and then when you roll the dice, those numbers could conceivably repeat. But if you're doing a card game, you might want to randomize your values, but you don't want the values to repeat. So what the tutorial does is it goes through and it gives an example where you're essentially you have a table of values, you're shuffling those values, you're drawing a card from the stack, and then you're setting it up in such a way that you don't reuse any of the cards. And then if you need to shuffle the deck and start over again, then you just basically repeat the whole process over again. So if we look at the code for that, make sure that I'm highlighting the code on the screen. What you wind up with is, at the top, you're going to go ahead and sort of create a random number, seeding it with the time from the local OS, and then you're going to create a table of cards. Now, in the example, it said, of course, you'd have 52 cards in a deck, but here, we're just going to do a few just to keep things simple. Then it kind of goes and prints out some stuff just so you can have the divider. But what it does is it runs through and it prints out the deck of cards, so you can see the unshuffled deck of cards. Then you've got essentially what amounts to, like we were talking about just a moment ago, a function that takes that table or that table as a parameter, and then goes in and shuffles the card. So it's at the cards. So it's basically what it's doing is it's just flipping through the stack of cards and swapping them with each other. So kind of randomly moving the cards around until it gets to the end. So that by the time it gets to the end, all the cards are shuffled. And they're basically reordered in the table. And then the next bit is the draw card, the actual pulling the card off of the stack and printing it to the screen or doing whatever you want to do with it in a way that doesn't necessarily make it repeat. So you create an index so that you can step through the array, and then you have this draw card function, which basically says, okay, what am I doing? How many cards do I want to pull off, and what do I want to pull them from? So you go and you call your draw cards function. You pass in the number of cards that you want. So in this case, we said 6, and then we want to pull it from the deck of cards, which is basically the shuffled deck of cards. And then, for simplicity, for illustration purposes, what it's doing is it's going and pulling sequentially. It's pulling the cards off of the deck, and because the cards are all shuffled already, each time you pull one off the deck, and because you're incrementing through sort of this array, you're not going to reuse any of the cards, which is what you want in a card game. And then if you want to, say, do that whole thing over again, then you would run through the whole process of shuffling the deck and then drawing the card, and you'd be good to go. Do you guys got any thoughts for that? Any tips on how to make that snazzier? Or?
Well, just don't forget to... Go ahead, Sergey.
I want to add that shuffling tables is very crucial in many games, and I have used it a lot.
Did you use it at all in the 2048? Is that
I think I have.
Okay. Ed, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, if you're going to be doing this in any game, make sure that you initialize the seed for your random library using something like the clock or some other number that's going to be changing over time and based on the platform, unless you want to have a consistent output on that device type.
You want it to be consistently random?
Well, no. What I mean is, I always forget this word, but it's random, but it comes out in the same order each time you run it.
Right.
So there are cases. Let's say you've got an Android device and an iOS device, and you want to give them both the same sequence of random cards. Well, you need a random generator that works and produces the same result on both devices, and that's not going to be the random library that comes with Corona, because that's dependent on what's supplied by the underlying operating system. So that's different between Android builds and iOS builds. And you're also going to need a seed. So once you solve that, then you're going to need a seed that is consistent between the two. But again, if you're trying for total randomness, you want to make sure to seed the random number generator with something like the clock or another number that you can be guaranteed to get a new seed from occasionally when people run it.
That's a good tip.
I wanted to comment on a couple of things that I know we're running out of time. We're sort of running over now. We're about to. But Sergey said some things that I just wanted to elaborate on. So I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Let me just do that. All right. So this is back on ellipses versus parameterized functions. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so today's discussion was about ellipses, which is basically the ... the variable arguments, I'm sorry. And the reason he and I'm putting words in your mouth, Sergey, you can always tell me I'm wrong, don't like these, for one reason, is that you have no sense when you look at this what the arguments are that are supposed to go in, what order they're supposed to be in, what they do. You've got no sense of it. So unless it's a very straightforward function like join, where you know that you're going to be taking strings and concatenating them, this isn't very useful because later on when you look at this, you've got no sense of what's going on. So in this case, this function is supposed to be printing the full name. Well, what's that mean? What it means is it concatenates the first two arguments, argument 1 and argument 2. And in this case, print full name Jim Bob would print out, if I were to print out the return value, or I'm sorry, run this, it would print out Jim space Bob, which kind of makes sense. But a better way to make a function like that, where you know what the number of arguments are that you want, and you know what they're supposed to be representing, would be to parameterize it. So I just made a variable called params, and it can be anything. And then inside, I concatenate params dot first, which is the field containing the first name, and params dot last. And then later on, when I run this or use this function, I could type it like this, or I could type it like this, and both would get the same result. So it gives me the latitude of organizing my function call in any way that I find most legible, most readable, most meaningful to me, and yet at the same time getting a consistent result. The other thing go ahead.
And usually I don't put parentheses, only curly braces for such functions.
And I might. Oh yes, right. Let me correct my mistake here. Sorry. First I put Bob everywhere. I don't know why I did that. Right. What Sergey is saying is, in the case where it's a parameterized argument is the only thing that you're doing, the other way to make this function is like this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sergey.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is, you see this a lot in Lua examples. So no rounded parentheses, just brackets, curly brackets. And this implies that the only argument that's getting passed to the function is a table which contains these fields, last and first. Last being assigned Bob, first being assigned Jim. So another nice shorthand. However, for me, I almost always have some fixed arguments. For example, something you'll see a lot in SSK is functions that are like this. So I want them to pass in a display group as the first argument, always, and an X and a Y position. Those are sort of like required arguments. And then a parameterized table, and usually what I do internally, and we mentioned this in our discussion, is I start putting in default values. Et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, they have to pass in a display group, and I might even put in the default value for that. Is what this line is doing is it's saying just put it in the current display group, which is provided by Corona, the topmost one, and then they have to pass in an X and a Y position, and then I might do something like this is kind of a dumb example, but you could do something like this too. So now I'm adding a color parameter that has a default of red.
I want to point out one important thing is when you are passing a params table to any function and you modify the params table inside your function, and if later on you use the same param table for some another function, it gets modified and it might be not how it's called, expected behavior.
Right. You've got to know that the table that gets passed in is the same one that's going to be referenced in here, so modifications will apply the next time it's used. So if I had passed this in, I'm sorry, yeah, he saw me do that. What I meant to do was this. But if I had forced
It's the same.
Ram's color and then called it twice, the next one would have the same color regardless of what I did. Right, right. There was a question in the forums just recently. Values in Lua are passed by value. Arguments are passed by value, with the exception of tables, which are a reference to an existing table. Would you think that's the correct way to say it?
Yeah.
Sergey?
Everything in Lua is passed by value except tables, which passed by reference.
Mm-hmm. So one more thing. I know we're running over now at 6 minutes past. I mentioned the math library, and I just wanted to give you people a demonstration of why I find ellipses useful sometimes and powerful for certain scenarios. So I'm not going to explain what this code. I'm not going to go through all this code, but what I will say is this is my actual implementation, slightly modified for this example, of a vector add. And what it does is it adds two vectors to each other and returns either a new object with x and y fields, or that is, it returns either a table with an x and a y parameter, or it returns two discrete values, x and y, depending on the arguments that are passed in. For example, why do I have... Okay, yes. So I've created circle 1 and circle 2, which are display objects, which you know have an x and a y field. So the circ1 x would be 10, the circ1 y would be 10, circ2 x is 10, and circ2 y is 50, if I were to print the values out. I can then treat these like vector components, and I can add circ1 to circ2 and return either two discrete values, x and y, or with the same function, just pass two objects and get a table back. Or I can pass in four values, circ1.x, circ1.y, etc., and get two discrete values, or a table. So I know this is a lot to consume all at once, but the point is that by using ellipses and then writing my code so that it can recognize, did a number get passed, how many arguments were passed in, it can make decisions and create a flexible vector addition function, or provide you a flexible solution which allows me to pass a number of different argument types and get a number of different returns based on my needs. So that's that. Any questions, or is that completely mind-numbing?
No, I think that's a good like concrete example of what you guys were trying to talk about earlier. It's hard to imagine some of these things sometimes, but you see it in code, it's like, there we go.
Yeah,
makes sense.
I hope it makes sense. I know this is the problem with ellipses is it's kind of an advanced topic, and then you, like I did here, I glossed over the entire implementation here.
Well, luckily the tutorial does a pretty good job of giving you the basics, and then, like you say, you can kind of go through and from there. And because just like functions, I mean, functions are by concept a fairly straightforward concept, right? You want to have a piece of reusable code, and sometimes you need to pass values to it, and sometimes you need to get values from it. But when you start putting in the nuts and bolts of what the function does, then yeah, things get complicated pretty quick. So the idea is just to introduce everybody to this concept and get them thinking about it. Yeah, exactly. So that's what, and hopefully that's what we've done today. So if you haven't had a chance to go check that out, go do so. We'll put links to everything in the show notes as always. And before we jump out of here, I want to say congratulations to Ray Delia for winning this month's Geek Games. Basically, we played Dr. Spin this month for Zetas to do high score on that and to figure out who was going to be the champion. And he submitted his. He was the top at. Let's see see if I can find it here. He was the top at 32,000 Zetas. 32,000 $1,999 to be exact. So congratulations to Ray. He's going to get a $50 gift card to a retailer of his choice. I personally would use that for iTunes, and then go off and buy, either software or can you use that? Can you cross over to buy hardware with iTunes stuff? It's all Apple, right? I mean, they don't care.
Crossover. I like that.
Well, I always think of the store and the online store and the inline, the physical store is separate, but I guess they're the same thing. It all goes in the same bank account.
Same coffers.
Yeah. And then the next game that we're going to play, and I'll post a link to all of this in the show notes, is going to be City Birds. If you haven't played City Birds before, it's addictive. It's addictive. I have to warn you right away. You're essentially trying to keep these. It's bird management, basically. You're trying to put these birds into their cages as they come across the screen, and they come in at varying speeds, and you have varying quantities of birds on the screen at any one time, and you have to match the color bird to the color cage, and then you have things like the eggs you have to avoid, and dynamite you have to avoid, and you have power-ups that you can get, and it's a great job. We had the developer on last year, I think it was, and he did a great job of explaining everything, but he did all the artwork for it, he did the programming for it, he sourced all the sounds, all that kind of stuff like that. So it's one of those. It's one of those great stories of a solo developer putting everything together themselves. So we're going to play that for December, and we'll give away another prize. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to make the prize just yet. I want to kind of maybe spice things up, but we'll announce that pretty soon. So if you haven't had a chance, go check that out. And as always, thanks for being here. We'll be back here next Monday to talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. And until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Bye.